Anti-government protesters have stormed Brazil's Congress, demanding a military coup. Dozens of demonstrators broke into the lower house chamber in Brasilia late on Wednesday, clashing violently with guards. Gathering in the middle of the plenary, many called for a return to military rule. They also blasted what they see as endemic government corruption. More than 60 politicians, including former President Lula da Silva, remain embroiled in a scandal related to state oil firm Petrobras. The protest in Brasilia came as military police in Rio clashed with demonstrators. Legislators in the city were debating deep cuts to public spending when protesters broke down barriers outside the state assembly.
A car bomb has targeted foreign-backed militants in the northern Syrian province of Aleppo. The incident in the town of Azaz claimed 25 lives, among them both militants and civilians. Dozens were also injured. A senior official of the Nuruddin al-Zinki militant group, whose members were among the dead, said the attack seems to have been carried out by Daesh members. The so-called Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the bombing ripped through an arms depot of Nuruddin al-Zinki. The group, which is largely based in Aleppo province, receives military support from the United States as part of Washington's backing for what it calls moderate militants in Syria.
Meantime, they're still fuming over what they consider their surprise election loss, and now demanding hundreds of colleges and universities be transformed into sanctuaries for illegals threatened under a Trump administration.
Jackie Ibanez is live in the studio with more on that. Jackie.
Good morning, Heather and Rob. From California to Michigan to New York, tens of thousands of students staging walkouts to protest President-elect Donald Trump and his immigration policies.
Sanctuary campus, sanctuary campus, sanctuary campus.
Students using the hashtag Sanctuary Campus as their battle cry while demanding their universities become a place of safety for minorities and illegals. Many of those same students at Rutgers University in New Jersey admitting they didn't even vote, believe it or not, in last Tuesday's election, but they still insist that they won't accept Mr. Trump as their president.
It's not my president because he's disrespected people, my people. I'm black and Hispanic. He's disrespected my people, not even just racially my people, but my people as women.
Schools and institutions, again, are places where people from all different backgrounds come together. So if that's not the case, then what's the purpose?
At the end of the day, he is our president. He's just not a president I like.
I think their points are very, very flawed. That's why we came out here, to give a presence to students who think that our country and our president should be respected.
The potential bill was filed as a prelude to the 2017 Georgia legislative session, and it's not necessarily a new law. It just expands on the current anti-masking law in the state. What it would do, if it was passed into law, was that it would prohibit women from wearing a burqa or veil in their driver's license. The problem, though, is that a law already exists like that. The wording, however, suggests that the restriction would expand to nearly all public places. This is obviously very concerning for Muslim leaders. Last night I spoke to Imam Sheikh Saladin Wazir, who says that this is an unnecessary law, and the only reason it's being proposed now is because Donald Trump was elected.
That sweet sound won't be going anywhere soon. People once worried if Donald Trump did not win the election, their gun owning and shooting rights would be gone.
I thought Hillary was going to win the election, and she had said she was going to try and get rid of military weapons, so I decided to go ahead and just pull the trigger on it.
Democrat David Banner had been looking for years to buy his second rifle, and like many of Doug's Shootin' Sports customers, he went ahead and jumped the gun. And even though Trump won, he's still going to hang on to it.
I probably would have waited another year or so.
Sales manager Dave Larson felt that pre-election anxiety from his customers.
I did have one gentleman order a gun from me on Tuesday, and then after the election results came in, he called me up and said, "I don't want it anymore, Dave. Let's cancel that order." I asked him point blank, I said, "Is this because Donald won?" He said, "Yeah, kinda."
With the Trump election, sales have slowed over the last week.
If Hillary had won, I probably wouldn't be talking to you because we'd have a store full of customers right now.
But he is not upset over it, and neither is his competition, Discount Guns and Ammo.
There was some awareness, there was some apprehension, and we had a number of customers come in and say, "We want to do this while we can. We're not sure where things are going."
While a big sales spike would have been nice,
So I think the pressure's off for a little while.
with Trump's win, both store owners say they feel bulletproof until the next election.
In her first public appearance since conceding the election, a candid Hillary Clinton tells a supportive crowd that it hasn't been an easy week.
Now, I will admit, coming here tonight wasn't the easiest thing for me. There have been a few times this past week when all I wanted to do was just to curl up with a good book or our dogs and never leave the house again.
Goodness. Take a look at this. Yes, everyone noticed something absolutely sick about Hillary Clinton last night. Look at her. She is at death's door. My goodness, what has happened to this woman? She looks absolutely horrible. I mean, her eyes are completely bloodshot, super bags under her eyes. Her hair, I mean, she just looks beat up. My goodness. This is her first public appearance, by the way. Paris Swade for Liberty Writers reports that Hillary looks like death, and I agree. He writes that she lost the presidential election and she came out and spoke, and yes, she looks like death. He actually jokes. He says, "Is that the Grim Reaper?" No, Paris, the Grim Reaper is simply waiting for her. Paris believes that she was either crying her eyes out or she's been on a huge bender. Probably both. Probably both. Now, if you recall the story we did just recently that revealed that she was actually completely intoxicated on the evening of the election. Some more breaking news for you now. Yes, Hillary Clinton, the real reason she disappeared on election night has been leaked. Yes, my friends, look at her getting sauced. Bad news, bad optics once again for Hillary Clinton. The bad news doesn't stop with her, does it? Danny Gold for Liberty Writers News reports that we all remember on election night when Hillary Clinton decided not to go and address her supporters or give a concession speech, instead making John Podesta tell them to all go home. And if you ask me, as I've stated here, there was a big slap in the face to all those people who worked for her for so hard, supported her, hands down. People were weeping in that crowd, and she turned their back on them. Well, now they say there are a bunch of rumors why she didn't go, like she was crying at home or she was planning how to cheat the election. Well, radio host Todd Kincannon from the Kincannon Show said that he actually spoke with a CNN reporter who was with her on election night. And now the real reason Hillary disappeared was because she was in a drunken rampage. Okay, they write here she was not just a regular drunk. According to the report, she was actually being physically violent towards Robbie Mook and John Podesta, who she blamed for losing. So Hillary gets violently drunk and starts attacking her staff physically. Now, the CNN reporter, they state, it says here, CNN reporter tells me Hillary became physically violent towards Robbie Mook and John Podesta around midnight. They state she had to be briefly restrained. Okay, that is actually a tweet from the Kincannon Show. They state here that Kincannon also said the attacks got so bad that her doctor had to step in and add sedatives to her alcohol just to calm her down. Wow. So she's like on double downers
The
now.
city of Aleppo hasn't seen any strikes by Russia's air force for almost a month now. The pause is to allow civilians and what Moscow has described as sane opposition to leave. However, the terrorists in control of eastern Aleppo are threatening anyone attempting to flee. RT's Murad Gazdiev, who's now in Syria, has more details.
Mood for protests, resistance seems to be sweeping the rebel-held part of Aleppo, eastern Aleppo. More and more videos are emerging from the city, showing people resisting, standing up to rebel rule. They're deeply unhappy with the rebels themselves, and especially some of their policies. The Russian Ministry of Defense says, according to its intelligence, 11 mass protests have taken place in eastern Aleppo just over the last week. Anybody who tries to leave eastern Aleppo to get out, well, they face the brutal end of rebel rule.
According to those civilians who escaped eastern Aleppo, terrorists almost daily carry out punitive actions in all the districts they hold. They shoot not only civilians, but also those militants who decided to quit the resistance.
Over the last few days, there have been also apparently a number of attempts to storm aid warehouses controlled by rebels. All the UN humanitarian aid, all the food, the medicine, the hygiene goods that are brought into eastern Aleppo, they don't go out to the public. This is a well-known fact. The militants, the rebels there, hoard them in warehouses and dole out what they see fit to the public. people there are very unhappy. They say they get only very little from the rebels. Yesterday, apparently, they tried to storm one of the warehouses, and they were shot at by the rebels. More than a dozen people dead, according to various sources. We've been there for 6 weeks, and the problem here is that no peaceful solution seems to be working.
The message was, stop bombing Aleppo, and the suffering ends.
It could stop tomorrow morning, tonight, if Russia and the Assad regime were to behave according to any norm.
So they did. From the 18th of October, Russian jets disappeared from the skies over eastern Aleppo. There hasn't been a single airstrike in 4 weeks. As for the rebels, we're in the al-Assad summer, and the rebels are pushing into Aleppo again. They attacked. Twice they tried to break into the city.
At least 50 people have been arrested on the Greek island of Chios after violence erupted at a migrant camp. According to local media, refugees set tents on fire before looting nearby shops, smashing cars and stealing fireworks to launch at local residents. 4 people were reportedly taken to hospital following the unrest. This local woman said the police did not come to take them away. They were holding sticks, jumping across courtyards and running up and down and causing damage. And the police were nowhere to be seen. I phoned them 3 times and they told me officers were elsewhere. What kind of response is that? The riot was apparently triggered after those inside the camp clashed with supporters of the far-right Golden Dawn Party. It's estimated more than 60,000 asylum seekers remain stranded in Greek camps.
Abandoned houses at one of the deserted villages on India-Pakistan border near Jammu. People have left behind everything, including their livestock, to save their lives as border tensions between the 2 neighbors continue to mount. Press TV's team has visited Abdullah village near the line of control, where people have heartbreaking stories to tell.
It was at midnight and suddenly a huge explosion. We left our homes instantly to find safety in the nearby village. Next morning, as we came to see what had happened, we saw our homes in rubble and our cattle lying dead. We are scared. We always have to leave our homes because of cross-border shelling.
As we were driving along the line of control, we saw Deer Singh, a farmer, lonely and desperate, walking towards his farm. Deer Singh lost his limb when mortar shell hit the farm while he was working on. He lost a son in cross-border firing in 2015.
Some advances by the predominantly popular mobilization units. It's Shiite militia backed by Iran, often trained by Iran. They've been making considerable progress. They've taken Tal Afar airport. Tal Afar is a city about 20 kilometers to the west of Mosul, and important because it offers an escape route to Islamic State fighters trying to escape from Mosul. Apart from that, to the south, the Iraqi army continues to make progress, albeit incremental. They're getting closer and closer to Mosul airport, which is itself just 3 kilometers from the city's borders. And in the east too, the Golden Division from the counter-terrorism services has been making more progress, taking over another district in the east of the city. But talking to about losses and about the difficulties they're facing as the Islamic State organization inside Mosul begins to use slightly more advanced technology, better equipment, better weaponry than they've been using hitherto. Out in the open spaces in front of Mosul, quite often they were using homemade weaponry. They're now beginning to use very sophisticated anti-tank weapons, which are nullifying the effect of the armory that the army has at its disposal. A weapon called the Kornet, which is a Russian version of the Milan anti-tank weapon that the Iraqi army has been using to nullify in turn the effect of ISIS car bombs.
Breaking now in the battle to defeat ISIS in Iraq, with Iraqi special forces pausing their push into the Islamic State's last major stronghold in that country, Mosul, as the terror group launches deadly attacks on civilians and troops. But there is progress. Iraq's Shia militia says it is on the verge of driving ISIS from an airbase just west of Mosul. Greg Palcott, live in Erbil, Iraq. Greg.
John, you are right. Iraqi forces say that they are pausing today. Unfortunately, ISIS did not pause, to deadly effect The latest reports we are getting from the eastern side of that city is that an ISIS car bomber and a sniper left several Iraqi soldiers and civilians dead, and others were injured. There are new reports also of mass graves found to the south of Mosul, 200 said to be executed by ISIS. All of this fighting is pushing many residents of Mosul to flee and pushing others to help the refugees. Take a look at what we saw today.
Each of these stacks represents 30 days worth of rations for a family of 5. The folks here show their identification, come over here, pick up the sacks of wheat and flour, and then take them back to their tents at this sprawling refugee camp. Basics, just to get by.
This aid is being distributed by the North Carolina-based Samaritan's Purse charity. They've been active for years in this region, which, by the way, has seen a lot of displaced Christians as well as Muslims. We talked to one staffer of the charity out of that camp. He feels like the charity is making a real difference. We also spoke with a refugee from Mosul, 42-year-old father of 5, Ali Mohammed. He helped personalize the story for me. He said he and his family lived like prisoners under ISIS for over 2 years. He was arrested twice and whipped by the militants. His crime? Smoking. It's forbidden under ISIS. He, like many others, fled at the height of the battle last week between ISIS and Iraqi soldiers in his neighborhood. Car bombs going off, rockets going off. He said it was very dangerous. He's happy now to be in a safe place. And one more thing, John, at least he and others there have a little bit of a light at the end of this very dark tunnel. They do believe that ISIS will eventually be driven from Mosul and they can get back to their home, their city. It's going to take a while, though.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Let's hope sooner than later. Greg Palcott live in Erbil, Iraq.
At least 19 people have been arrested in Kosovo on suspicion of having links with ISIL. It comes amid reports that a plot was foiled to attack the Israeli football team when it played in neighbouring Albania last week. Some 300 jihadists from Kosovo have travelled to Syria. Police say the suspects are thought to have been in contact with Lavdrim Muhajeri, a Kosovar Albanian fighter for so-called Islamic State, who's believed to have ordered attacks in Kosovo and Albania.
I would not advise people who feel strongly or are concerned about some of the issues that have been raised during the course of the campaign. I wouldn't advise them to be silent. What I would advise, what I advised before the election and what I will continue to advise after the election, is that elections matter, voting matters, organizing matters, being informed on the issues matter. And what I consistently say to young people, I say it in the United States, but I'll say it here in Germany and across Europe, do not take for granted our systems of government and our way of life. I think there is a tendency, because we have lived in an era that has been largely stable and peaceful, at least in advanced countries, where living standards have generally gone up, there is a tendency, I think, to assume that that's always the case.
Authorities in Turkey have detained the mayor of Van. Amateur video showed plainclothes police escorting the official from council offices in the southeastern city earlier. A co-leader of the pro-Kurdish DBP party was also reportedly detained as the central government seized control of 3 municipalities in the region. Later, police fired water cannon and tear gas to disperse around 100 people who had gathered outside Van's council house to protest against the mayor's detention. Turkey is currently fighting an insurgency by Kurdish PKK militants in its southeast. The country has also seen tens of thousands of arrests as part of a wider security crackdown following July's failed coup.